What's up, my fellow Michiganders? I know you all are expecting the number 9 moment in Detroit sports history. I was thinking about, the moment that I wanted to pick for that slot. But then something bigger came up on my mind, and this is definitely a tough story to talk about. And, you see the title down below. This isn't going to be a fun video, but it's just so deep in my mind that I I can't be silent on it. I've got to talk about it. You know, when I was a kid, I was a big history buff, and I studied a lot of the history of Michigan football. And even though I wasn't born to see it, it was pretty cool talking to all the adults in my life about the days of Bo Schembechler, the days where we were winning 11, 12 games a year, making Big Ten championships, making Rose Bowls, beating Ohio State consistently. And then having the 10-year war with Woody Hayes. There's just so much legacy there. And after all that's been happening recently, I've kind of had a change in perspective. Obviously, a little bit about Bo Schembechler himself, but just about sports in general and the way us fans should view sports. Well, if you haven't really heard about the situation, it really hasn't been covered as much as the Larry Nassar situation, which I think is a little bit interesting. I think partially it might be because Bo Schembechler is dead. The Bo Schembechler is dead and the team doctor is dead. But let me just explain the situation. So Robert E. Anderson was the team doctor for the University of Michigan for 3 decades in the 60s, 70s, and 90s. And allegedly, he sexually assaulted hundreds of University of Michigan students, several of them being student athletes. And in terms of what Bo Schembechler did about it, there's a lot of conflicting reports right now. Jim Harbaugh recently came out and defended Bo Schembechler, saying that there's no way a man like him could do this. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but Harbaugh was adamant about his defense of Bo Schembechler. A lot of family members from Bo Schembechler said that he did not know about the abuse that was going on, but there's a few other former players, such as Craig Anderson, who states that Schembechler did know what's going on, and there's a loud group of a few others as well. But the one that's really heartbreaking is his stepson, Matt Schembechler. Schembechler recently just came out and said that he was abused by this team doctor when he was 10. And he told his dad about it, and Bo did not do anything about it. Didn't break it out. Both Bo and Don Canham didn't do much about the situation. And, obviously, I'm always let the court case go on, let's see what the case says, but I have a really hard time believing that someone's son would lie about a situation like that. I also have a hard time believing that hundreds of student athletes would, lie about something like that. And this is just tough to talk about. We have to look at now Bo Schembechler's legacy. Now, Bo Schembechler is a dead man, and it is true that he cannot defend himself. I do think this, though. I think it's time to remove his statues and his name from the University of Michigan, meaning remove the name Schembechler Hall, rename it to Woodson Hall, or Wheatley Hall, something like that. I think it's time to remove the statues out in front of the hall, and this puts a damper on his legacy. Let's just be real. In terms of Bo Schembechler, the man himself, I got to be very careful talking about this because the fact of the matter is, tons of people were abused, and at the very, very least, Bo Schembechler did not do his due diligence of reporting what happened. But a part of me wonders, it's easy to sit here and villainize Bo. We have to remember the number one villain here is Dr. Anderson. He is the number one villain here. And if you enable someone, you're also a villain. But we also have to look at the time as well. The time does not excuse the action. But it does put it in a little bit of a different picture. When you look at the 1960s and 1970s, Schembechler was raised in the 40s and 50s. That was a time where gender roles were, very different. And it was also a time where victim shaming was very frequent. And it was probably also a time, where masculinity and being a man was really emphasized. And it's definitely still emphasized today, but now we've kind of gotten away from, if you're a man, you shouldn't cry. Like, that sort of thinking is what I'm talking about. Like, don't cry if you're a man. Part of me wonders if the combination of those three things, if Bo probably told his son, toughen up, and probably told some of the other football players to toughen up, because men shouldn't be displaying signs of weakness, and back then it probably was viewed as weak, to come out and report the situation. Yet again, I'm not excusing this at all. I'm not saying anything good about what happened. But is it a crime of the time that we lived in, or a crime of Mr. Schembechler himself? And it can be both as well. It is possible that Schembechler did care about his players, and that he even cared about his stepson, but quite simply he had the stigma from, growing up in a time of great sexism and, a time of rampant victim shaming, that I wonder if he's just a product of the times. Yet again, not excusing anything. But I'm not ready to say that Schembechler is evil. Valenti is absolutely right. I listened to his radio show. Mike Valenti is absolutely right that the media is not covering this enough, and that people have been really quick to defend Schembechler, which I don't want to do, because you don't want to put the victims in that situation. And at the very least, Schembechler covered something up, or didn't do what he needed to do about the situation. That's that. And even with the times that we lived in, there's no excuse for it. But to label him as evil, I understand it, and it makes sense, but I don't really know what his intentions were. He obviously was occupied with building stronger, tougher men, and unfortunately, probably back then, reporting stuff like that probably made you weak. Probably his response was just deal with it yourself, which a lot of times when you face adversity, that is how you deal with it. But when you're facing someone like this, you have to confront them, and you have to do something about it. You shouldn't have to hide a situation like this, because it makes the world a very scary place. So I do want to see some more stuff come out. I'm not ready to label Bo as an evil person. I think he just didn't do what he needed to do in the situation, and I think the better word is negligent. I think he was very negligent and too preoccupied with, a very bad mindset. But I do think he did care about his players, and, it's hard to say if, what his mindset actually was. Yet again, he is a dead man, and we aren't really hearing anything from his side, and we'll never know what his testimony would have been if he had a chance to speak and defend himself. I know that doesn't mean that he's not in the wrong. Yeah, he is in the wrong. But the last point I want to bring up is the change in perspective that I had. I remember the first day I moved into college here at Virginia Tech. We were unpacking clothes. My mom and my stepdad, we were unpacking everything. And I pulled out a shirt that had a picture of Miguel Cabrera on it and the Detroit D. And, I was about to put it in the drawer, and my stepdad came up and told me, I don't know if you should wear this shirt. I was like, why? And he said, it kind of seems like you're idolizing an adult. I was kind of befuddled at first, but then I really thought about it, and I was like, you're right. There's absolutely nothing wrong with respecting Miguel Cabrera and, appreciating and witnessing all the great things that he did. But we have to be careful of going too far with how much we idolize or how much we glorify some of these athletes and coaches. And in terms of glorifying, Bo Schembechler is one of the most glorified coaches, I'd say, in college football history. You look at his speeches online; they're bone-chilling. A lot of players loved him. He bailed a few of his players out of jail. I mean, this guy was a legendary coach, and he won a lot of games. But what we have to remember something. At the end of the day, he's a coach. At the end of the day, these are athletes. They do provide value to our life. They provide entertainment, which is great. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But we have to remember this too. They get all the recognition because they're in the media, and it's what makes us feel good. But the truth is, you know who makes just as big of a difference in our lives? Plumbers. Because I can tell you right now, I'm very grateful to have this house around. And if it weren't for plumbers, a lot of people would die. And, we probably wouldn't have the infrastructure that we have in this country. You look at plumbers, you look at doctors, veterans, all construction workers, all kinds of people that provide value in different ways to our lives. And my point with that comparison is, at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that provide value to our lives, but we don't bow down to them or idolize them. Except I was guilty of this for a while. We have a tendency to do that with athletes and coaches, and I think what's happening with Bo Schembechler is a perfect example of that, and I'm guilty of it. I just remember reading the history books when I was a kid. I love watching his speeches. The big 1969 game against Ohio State was one of the best games in college football history. Just so much legacy. It's easy to get wrapped up in that and forget that at the end of the day, he's just a coach, and we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. We see the speeches, we see the players getting fired up, we see, him talking to the media, but there's a lot of stuff we don't see. And sometimes you never really know what kind of dirt a person has on them. And it's clear, the very least you can say about Schembechler is that he acted with negligence or stubbornness, and negligence and stubbornness. I think those are two adjectives you can describe to this. It's possible he was a great motivator and also those two other things. No one's ever all good or all bad. But there does seem to be a tendency from a lot of local reporters to kind of put Schembechler on a pedestal because of his accomplishments and his speeches. But just remember, he was a great coach, but he's not God. And that's sort of where we have to find the fine line between idolization and respect. It's totally okay if you respected his coaching. A lot of people kind of felt the same way about O.J. Simpson too, that he was this legendary running back and this great guy with great charisma. There was a lot of stuff we didn't know. And then next thing you know, we find out that, he was involved in a murder case and probably did it. So we also have to be careful of he would never do something like that. No one ever looks at somebody and says, oh, that guy's a pedophile. That guy's an evil person. There's a lot of stuff that we just don't know about people. And, sometimes we see the good, especially with social media in this day and age. We see all the good that someone did, but oftentimes, that's why they share it. People don't share their bad highlights. They share everything good that's going on. So what we have to remember is that these guys, they are athletes, they are coaches, and they provide value to our lives. But at the end of the day, they're not superhuman. And we have to be careful of idolizing to a point where we're just in flat out denial of all this that's going on. I'll say one last thing, I do think eventually they're going to tear down Schembechler Hall, and it's absolutely the right thing to do. I think there's going to be a lawsuit against the university. I do think Jim Harbaugh is going to get some backlash for some of his comments because the fact of the matter is he totally dismissed the victims. There's too many victims in this case to just be quiet about it and just assume that Schembechler knew about it. Even Harbaugh himself, he played for Jim Harbaugh. I'm sure he was very close to him. But I don't know if you guys have ever seen a picture of that iceberg, We only see the tip of the iceberg with people, but 99% of the time, there's a lot of things we don't see under the water. Like an iceberg is huge, but we only see a tiny tip of it above the water. Even when you're a player, you're only spending a couple hours a day with your coach. There's a lot of stuff that you don't know is going on. So the fact is, Jim Harbaugh, kind of was putting Schembechler on this pedestal like his father, like Schembechler was his father, and we have to be careful of doing that, because at the end of the day, Schembechler was his coach, and a coach is important to someone's life. I'm not saying it's not, but at the same time, it does go to an extent. We have to find that fine line between respect and idolization. I respect Miguel Cabrera. I respect, Denard Robinson. I loved watching him when I was a kid, but at the same time, these guys are athletes. These guys are athletes, and they're human beings like you and me. So I kind of think that's where my perspective has shifted, and maybe it's time for Michigan to kind of let go of the past. We talk all the time about most wins in football history. We talk all the time about the good old days with Schembechler, the good old boys club. I think it might be time to kind of embrace a new beginning. Enough hiring Michigan men, enough hiring guys just because they were affiliated with Mr. Schembechler. It's time to move forward and build something new, build something exciting, and have a program of integrity, have a program of winning games, have a program that is enthusiastic, and have a program that, most importantly, well, I already said integrity, but do the right thing. I think it's time for us to move forward. We're going to have to remove Schembechler Hall, and we just got to embrace the new future. Let's build some new memories. All right, guys, thank you all for watching. I know this wasn't the funnest video in the world, but I really want to get to number 9 because that was one of my favorite moments, in Detroit sports history. What I'm going to say. I'm not going to leak it out in this video, but you'll get to see. In case you didn't see it, number 10 was the 10th greatest moment in Detroit sports history, in my opinion, was the Lions coming back against the 49ers in 1957. A lot of you probably don't remember that, but I encourage you to go look at that story. The story actually surprised me quite a bit, and I really enjoyed making it. All right, guys, thank you all for watching. You all have a good night. Take care. Go Blue.